Well, I'm back to playing Magic again. Hopefully, I had a very tough time over the last few weeks where I basically saw this ban list change that they made to the 1v1 play, and I kind of decided that I was done. I wasn't going to play any more Magic online. Wasn't going to play any more Magic at all, frankly. Um, as this is pretty much the only format I enjoy, and they killed it. So, what do I mean by that? Well, and I suppose I will say this, it's possible I could get into maybe vintage or some other format, but it would be quite a process and it would take me a lot of time to make the transition. So, anyway, having said that, so what I mean by kill this deck, this format for me was if you take a look here, there are 20 unique cards over here that they've banned in my deck over the course of time. On top of which, there are two additional cards I'm not using that I might use if I needed to fill some gaps due to the having if they due to them banning cards, like say they ban treachery, so I decide I need to use mode or something. I don't have that option either. So a grand total of, for my style I like to play, 22 cards banned. On the side of green, on the mono green side, they have actually banned -1, I believe the count is, as they took their initial ban list and started removing cards from it for the green decks. So they banned 22 cards that the control player might like to use and -1 for the green, and said go. And for me, that is not cool and is not fun. It is not what I want to spend my time doing. And it kind of reached a breaking point when they actually banned all the tutors recently. They decided they didn't even want consistency. They want control decks to be just truly like, I don't know, play a billion counter spells because you don't have the consistency to go get your answers. So you have to play cards that answer everything, and you just play a million of them and hope that that's going to get it done. And to me, that is probably the worst, most tedious, terrible way to play Magic, next to not playing control at all, which was the other option, and I don't want to do that. So it's just not why I play this game. I like control. I like playing control because I like feeling like I have to make good choices. My choices matter, and I like that kind of combination of chess and poker that you get with this style of gameplay and that you don't get with any other style. Whereas playing without all these cards feels more like, to me, playing a game of war where you just say, well, my card is more powerful than your card, so I win. Or my hand is better than your hand, so I win. Or my top decks are better than your top decks. Like, it feels totally luck based. And I understand that that's what the company wants in general for the game, because luck, the more random factors you have in a game, the more that you favor bad players. And bad players potentially will spend more money, I think, is what they're counting on, than good players, because good players tend to have a robust collection. So they're not spending as much money. So good players are good for the game on film to advertise, but bad players are good for the bottom line, and that's what they care about the most. I think that their whole concept, though, totally falls apart when you look at old formats like this, where you've got to be a long-time player and you have to have some interest in things like consistency and deck building to even get into this format. And in that case, I think that their whole idea falls apart also because what they're doing is they're taking away. This is one of the last refuges for people that enjoy this style of gameplay that isn't just totally destroyed by degeneracy, like the 1v1 player experience has actually ultimately come down to. So I don't know, for a lot of reasons I don't enjoy playing it. I haven't had fun with it. I mean, I as they kept kicking my legs out from under me, I would, get back up and find another way to win, and they would take away whatever I was using to hold myself up, and I would stand back up and find another way to win each season as they ban more and more of this deck. If you want to think about how insane it is that they banned 22 unique cards for this deck, consider that if you're playing a format like a typical format where you play four of all your best cards, and then you play all, say maybe eight of your, say, seven or eight of your cards, and then maybe two of this and two of that, right? So you play a deck where you've got say 24 lands, 8 copies, 8 times 4, and then two of a different card, two of a different card. So that would make a grand total of 10 unique cards in a 60 card deck. 10. So they banned 20 cards in here plus two more in the sideboard. Basically, you could look at it that way. So 22 cards in my deck, which means that it would take you 2 full decks of standard in the way that I described, not the toolboxy decks, but the traditional decks. So it would take like 2 full decks, and you still wouldn't have banned enough cards to actually ban as many cards as they banned, as many tools as they took away from me in Commander. So like you know, if you showed up to a tournament with 3 decks, with in the capability to build 3 decks from your collection, and you build your favorite deck, and they banned it right before the tournament started, and you said okay, and you took out your second favorite deck, and they banned that whole deck, they still haven't banned as many cards as they did from my deck here in Commander. When you take out your third deck, they would have to start banning cards from that to finally break even with the number of cards they banned in here. And at that point, for me, they banned me out of the format. I'm just not interested in playing anymore. So I was going to completely quit. I had a conversation with Brian Weissman, and he said, you know, hey, Nate, he thinks that players actually, you guys you folks would enjoy seeing me run the multiplayer ban list, because I mean you enjoyed it before, so why would it be any different now? That I had to give that a shot. So I decided, okay, I'm going to go back to playing Commander the way that we played it for years, which is before this stupid league, which is just simply we play 1v1, but we use the multiplayer ban list, which is a much healthier ban list, and so that's what I did. So we started putting together some games, and hopefully you're going to enjoy them. Now, before I get started, I will touch base quickly on the card choices. Some of these are actually informed from the experience in the leagues, which have probably made this deck a little bit better than it might have otherwise been without having played in that format. So there are probably too many synergies to really fully describe in here, and maybe I'll make a video where I try to do exactly that. For now, I'll just hit a couple of them if it makes sense to do so. So there are also, in addition to the 22 cards that they banned from this deck, there are also roughly somewhere approaching 18 cards that only make sense when you have access to the other 22. So for example, there are cards like Thran Dynamo and Gilded Lotus don't make as much sense. Karn Liberated and Teferi and so forth, they don't make as much sense in this deck, even though they're legal in that other format, when you don't have the kind of speed that you need, when you don't have access to cards like Mishra's Workshop and so forth to power these cards out, Soul Rings and stuff. So it actually, in reality, it's much closer to almost 40 cards difference between this and the single player list, just because of when you take the 22 out and it completely warps the deck, and you have to change almost another, between 15 and 20 other cards to deal with the missing 20 plus. And at that point, I mean, well, at that point, I don't know. I don't know what you're playing, but you're not playing Commander, at least from my perspective. Unless you're playing green, in which case, hey, go for it. You get more tools. They actually allow you to play with more cards in the 1v1 green versions than you get to play in the multiplayer list, if I remember correctly. So, go ahead. No bias there, though, I'm sure. Anyhow, all that said, so let's take a look at these cards. So with that in mind, so there are cards in here like Chromatic Lantern that wouldn't have made any sense at all in the 1v1, but when you can run a Workshop into a Lantern as a first turn potentially, or at any point in the game, turning a Workshop into a usable land is very, very strong. Urborg also does that, so there's 2 ways to do it, plus Expedition Map, plus Weathered Wayfarer to go get Urborg. Makes 4 ways to do exactly that. Make a Workshop into a usable land for the occasions when you don't have anything to cast with it. Conveniently, Urborg also as well as Chromatic Lantern, allows you to tap all of your lands for black, which means that Necropotence is imminently more playable. So there's just one example of some kind of little weird synergies where you're actually synergizing Necropotence with Mishra's Workshop in a very weird way, but it's because of the cards that you use to support them. And like I said, this is kind of like one of the beauties of running this deck. So playing this versus playing the other version was like basically doing the same activity in a way that's slower and stupider. So when you play this, on the other hand, I mean, it's like flying. It's like it would be like flying a military jet as a pilot versus flying a two-seater airplane, which would be an enjoyable fun experience, but nothing like flying a military jet, right? So this is the jet. And so if you want that kind of like high octane, full speed ahead gameplay, then this is definitely where it's at. And I do. That's what I enjoy. So changes. It's kind of hard to go over the changes to the deck list versus the other one version, and I'm not quite sure what the best way is to approach this. So I'm trying to give you a picture of what's in the deck so that you can potentially copy, pause the video and take advantage of what you see if that interests you. I'm gonna go ahead and scroll back down for the lands. But one of the things that might jump out is that Scroll Rack and land tax are out. I'm down to only two basic islands. I have two in case of Path to Exile or somebody uses a Ghost Quarter, but also because I want to have at least 8 lands for Vedalken Shackles, 8 islands that is. Too bad there's no card like Urborg for islands. That would be like so brilliant. But anyway, so the third and fourth island are gone. One is Urborg. Cavernous Souls is in here, and I don't remember. Oh, the other one is Strip Mine, which was also banned. And of course, I had to fit Mishra's Workshop in here as well. I think I had 5 islands in the final version of the 1v1. So anyway, those are your 5. They all became much more utility lands, and as a result, land tax turned into Weathered Wayfarer. I originally took Weathered Wayfarer out, but I put it back in when I realized how strong it is. And that Humility, I decided not to run in the main deck, and I left Palace Jailer in instead, because Breya does a very good job of kind of faking a Humility when you need it, in terms of keeping the creature threat suppressed. So, all right, with all that said, let's take a look at some games, because as much as fun as it is to talk, I think we'll be able to get into more deck discussions later. But as much fun as it is to talk about that, I think you probably come here mostly for the gameplay rather than for the discussions in general. And so I don't want to bore you with too much blabbing. Now, right here, this loss is right where I took Humility out. I actually had Humility in here. Not only did I make a bunch of stupid errors, but Humility completely cost me that game. To give you the details, I tried replaying it, but it crashed. This is my third or fourth time trying to record this video. But basically, I had a Skull Clamp, and I could have easily won the game. I had a million mana, but Breya was coming into play as a 1/1 with no abilities, and I can't clamp it into the graveyard more than once. And so I was like doing creative stuff like copy Artifact of Breya, kill the original, clamp the copy, draw 2 cards, yay. It just wasn't good. And like I said, it ended up costing me a game, and I realized Humility didn't make as much sense in the Breya deck as it does in a deck like Oloro, which very enjoyable also to play, but has just a different feel to it. So I took Humility out, and then from there I proceeded to win all these games except for this one right here, where I made some really bad decisions, and I'm going to try to spin through all of those because I believe it's here that the deck actually starts to play like the deck that it is, rather than and also like I started out and I was so rusty. It's kind of like having flown that 2-seater plane for months and months and months, and then you put me behind the jet and I kind of forget how the controls handle it. Feels very different, and it's quite a bit more challenging to get it done. So hopefully as I continue to play, you will see some improvement on my side because it really does. This really is a deck that requires playing and playing and playing again for you to refine and hone your decision making. And without that, you're just not, you or I, none of us would win much without that kind of honing of choices, which is precisely what I like most about Magic. So here I'm playing against Krenko, and I've got actually a pretty bad start for Krenko, but it has some potential. It has Jitte and it's got Duretti, which means I could hopefully lock him down, but my opponent's got potentially turn to Krenko with the first turn Soul Ring. However, he plays Krenko's Command Mog War Marshal, which is, I think, wrong. He should have played his commander. So anyway, end of his turn, I Tithe Trick, though. I'm happy for him to do what he did. And we're going to go grab a couple lands here. Get a tapped land, I believe. And I got a Mind Twist, so that gives me a kind of way of doing something. And I actually intentionally didn't sack the map because I know I'm going to lose Krenko here, but it's worth it to kill a map and a Krenko, I mean a Duretti rather, to take out a Soul Ring. And my opponent misses a land drop, which is huge, so I get to play Breya next turn. And it actually looks like I've stabilized. I want to play his Goblin Recruiter, but he doesn't have any recruits, a bunch of goblins, but he doesn't go, for some reason, he doesn't go and get the goblin that lets you sacrifice another goblin to make red mana, which should be the one that he gets on top. He doesn't get that, so it's either in his hand or he's screwing up. And when he attacks me, and for no good reason there whatsoever, I realize it's got to be a case of screwing up here, right? Because that was a huge misplay. Anyway, so I just get GT down and go. And here you can see the 10 cards my opponent got. It's just a bunch of lackeys and stuff. I don't, this makes absolutely no sense. So you can see, like, that was a card that makes no sense. Goblin Recruiter there, and it's very easy to lose the game if you don't know what you're doing with it. And clearly my opponent didn't know what he was doing. So, yeah, we move on to the next game. But that was just very, very weird. It was a weird experience playing against somebody who doesn't play his commander and then just misplays like that. But I think maybe he just picked up the deck and is still getting a feel for it. Certainly would make sense. And in that case, I mean, it's not easy playing that kind of deck, actually. Playing that card correctly it's not easy at all. So, yeah, don't blame him. Anyway, so my next opponent is playing Grand Arbiter, but he doesn't get a first turn Soul Ring or Crypt. And Grand Arbiter's pretty much garbage if you don't get one of those cards. So I, on the other hand, do, which means this game's not going to go too well for him. And there's the Urborg into Necro, exactly like we described earlier. So, heck yeah, let's rock and roll. Take some damage, but this is another reason where Breya is like, where humility's awful. Like you get like these mana crypt necropotence hands, and you need Breya to eat the crypt. Like that's the solution to the mana crypt. So anyway, I wanted to. So here I'm making some plays, but I'm kind of sitting on a counter because as much as I want to play the Gilded Lotus, I feel like I want to make plays that my opponent's not liable to counter. And as long as I do that, I should be in good shape. I'm taking some damage here, obviously, and losing life, but I'm setting up to where I can get my commander down. And then once I get my commander down, life total won't be much of an issue anymore. So anyway, my opponent at this point is looking at the board and decides that he's not going to try to see if he can grind me out of 11 life. He's just going to go ahead and give up. So fair enough. I do believe that I had won that game. Certainly if he played his commander, he was going to lose. I mean, I just Swords to Plowshares it, and we just carry on with life. So anyway, all right, so this guy here is playing Captain Sisay. I've got first turn Soul Ring, but I actually telegraphed the Wasteland because I decided that turn 2 Stoneforge is so important that I don't want to risk if I play the Mana Confluence into Soul Ring, then that tells my opponent, anyone who knows even a bit about what they're doing, that may be the only land I have. And so I don't want to risk losing a card that screams kill me So I actually played the Wasteland and Telegraph that way. But my opponent has almost as bad of a draw as I do. He's playing Rampant Growth here, and I let it go. It's questionable if I should have Swords to Plowshare that or not. But all's forgiven. I mean, Force of Will that or not. But it just didn't seem quite right. Anyway, all's forgiven when I draw a strip mine there. All right, so I missed a turn of hitting him with Jitte so that I could get this sort of Feast and Famine down, even if I didn't draw a land, so I was fine with that. All right, he goes for one Power Stone. Not going to count on that either. I'm hoping to Vindicate it. Can't Vindicate it yet, but I ponder into this, and now I actually can. So I'm going to hit for damage, put the sword on the stack, untap my lands, and then Vindicate his planes. I decided to leave him with the Worn Power Stone because I'm trying to keep him off his color. So here, and as you can see, like, I don't know if the decisions that I was making really were the right choices or not. You can see how like awkward it is. But I mean, I was doing okay here, but I think I was doing. Oh, I'm sorry for the yawning. I think I was doing okay in spite of poor play rather than because of clever play. I was doing all right because the deck is just very very strong. So I think that had I been able to play that again with, say, a week from now or however long it takes for me to get back into the swing of things, I would have played it out differently and done a lot better and a lot faster at winning that game. So anyway, I had all the tools there. I just was putting together very awkwardly. All right, so it's a Breya on Breya mirror, and I got an insane start. And my opponent's got whatever the opposite of that is, a completely sane start, I guess. All right, so I'm going to sit on Stoic Rebuttal and pass. But I sack 100%. I'm going to play Enlightened Tutor here, or a counter spell. So I fetch before he could potentially stifle. Since he does nothing, I end to turn Enlightened Tutor for. Oh, I drew Urborg. Nasty, nasty Necro. This game is probably over. Man, that's nice. All right. So Mana Vault no longer procs because there's no draw step, but Mana Crypt will. I mean, the untap ability for Mana Vault procs, but the damage does not. All right, so tap for a bunch of mana. And I believe we're going to bug out this game because there's no way I would have tapped a million mana to cast Snapcaster Mage so I could brainstorm. So I'm fairly certain we're going to bug out. But it doesn't matter because, as I recall, my opponent conceded this turn. I think what I was actually playing was Karn on his Chancery or something crazy. I did something to his Chancery and then he scooped. All right, so anyway. And then this individual here, Nash, decides to play and then plays me a number of times to try different things, and I can totally respect that. So that was cool. In fact, I think he even asked, "Hey, is it cool if I do this?" And I was like, "Yeah, absolutely." So I got first turn Mana Vault, and he gets first turn Soul Ring, and we're playing Breya Mirror. So I would like to Tithe Trick, but disenchanting his Soul Ring is way more important. My opponent dazes it, so I've effectively disenchanted his Soul Ring, but he's disenchanted my Mana Vault for a while. And that damage could turn out to matter at some point. Certainly losing the mana mattered. Alright, so he's got mana there, but I'm able to impulse into a Crypt, which I'm going to use to ultimately untap that Vault. I drew a Toxic Deluge, which is not a happy times for me. Excuse me. I'm planning to Tithe here. He plays a Workshop, but no artifact to go with it, and I'm going to go ahead and Tithe. Tithe Trick him. So we'll go ahead and grab a few lands there. And then untap, upkeep. I think it's time to untap the Vault. So I'd really like to cruise here, and I have the mana to do it. But the thing is, if I run a cruise into a possible mana drain, then I think I pretty much am just begging to lose the game. So I'm not going to do that. That would be foolish. Here, have 8 mana. So what I'm planning to do is I'm just going to continue to develop mana past my opponent. And at some point he's going to deem something I do to be worthy of a counter. Probably my commander. After, I'll get Coalition Relic out next turn. And then, so I'll probably play my commander and he'll try to counter it. And that'll allow me to cruise my way to victory. But my opponent, having missed a land drop and looking at the mana situation where I've got 9 to his 5, but only 2 if he doesn't have artifacts, which he doesn't, he goes and packs it in there. So plays me another game. I figured that was because he, missed multiple land drops, and I figured it'd just be these 2 games. But again, he wanted to play a few, so we end up playing like 4, I believe it is. So he switches decks. Thrasios, Vile Smasher. Okay, no problem. Let's try it out. Hey, if you're gonna, I'm gonna just draw a Mana Vault every turn. Man, I've missed this. So anyway, he plays Training Grounds, which is pretty cool with the green commander there. Anyway, but I think my turn 2 is even cooler. So I get to Thran Dynamo into a Relic into a Weathered Wayfarer. I draw a copy artifact. So I'm going to go ahead and Wayfarer. And I want to get a Wasteland or a Strip Mine here, but I'm actually getting Cavern of Souls because it's very important. So here's where, look how much better this is than Humility. So it's very important that I take out his commander or else he's going to be able to activate it for only 2 mana. So it would get really out of hand really quickly. On his turn, he plays Nissa, which Training Grounds doesn't do much for. But that does open up Weathered Wayfarer for me to go ahead and go get another land. So I go get Workshop so that I can get this Lotus down. Like, just this deck just does not, and copy it. And then play them as always Jitte, equip on my Palace Jailer, swing in. My opponent is probably going to trade. Yeah, he's going to trade. Better do that than to lose this guy for nothing. And I draw another card off the Monarch. That's 2. This is one thing that I'm really glad that I figured out in 1v1 play. So he has an Inquisition, which is one of the best ways you can get a mana drain out of somebody's hand. It only gives me 1 mana now. He plays a Tectonic Edge. I go ahead and, so on this turn, I'm going to untap Karn. I charge a Relic, so I'm going to play a Stoneforge Mystic off the mana that I got for free and use that to play Sword of Feast and Famine. Equip the sword, and before I can even finish what I'm going to do, my opponent finally gives up. And I think that makes sense. I've got 3, 6, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 mana plus 6 temporary, so I've got just shy of 20. My opponent's got 4. Yeah, it's probably over. So then he jumps into a 3rd game against me. And I believe he switches decks again, if I'm not mistaken. He switches to Timna and Crom. Now, Timna's a little bit more, actually a lot more scary. And a first turn Curse Catcher. That's really bad. This hand I've got is pretty clunky and awkward, so I need to find some white mana pretty fast. And I do not. So I'm going to try to preordain here, hoping that it'll sack the Curse Catcher. The thing is, I don't want him to have a creature in play when he plays his commander. Well, he doesn't. He knows that, and he plays negate. So now I expect he'll play his commander and start drawing cards, but he misses a land drop, which is huge. So I need to get that Curse Catcher off the board before he can play his commander. I also need to get Crucible down, so I'm going to go ahead and, during his upkeep, I'm going to Impulse. He does counter the Impulse, but I find a Demonic Tutor, so I'm going to go Tutor. It resolves, so I get Shop, which I use to play Coalition Relic, which resolves also, which is huge, because now I can Swords his commander if he could play it. He cannot. I'm going to charge that sucker up and play City of Brass, cast a bait spell, which does nothing. I'm going to go for it. See, does he have another negate-like card? He does not. So I chase some cards into my hand, and he Mystical Tutors for Lightning Bolt. Okay. Fair enough. So he's not giving up yet. He's still trying to play this game on two lands to my 8 mana over here. So anyway, my turn. I go ahead and Factor Fiction during upkeep. He offers me Skull Clamp or 4 cards. I'll take 4 cards. Skull Clamp represents 4 cards, so what are you going to do? But that digs me down to a Treasure Cruise. Then I'm able to Soul Ring Crypt. So I'm going to throw down, I've thrown down an extra 5 or 6 mana this turn. And my opponent mental missteps my Skull Clamp. Not the Soul Ring, he does the Clamp. That's the right card, but how funny. Alright, anyway, I'm going to go ahead and Mystical Teachings at the end of his turn. And he's got even Mind Sensor. So, man, this guy's like, he's got it all, considering that he doesn't have mana. He has everything else, though. I, on the other hand, have kind of got it all, too. So I'm going to go ahead and play Breya. Take out his mind sensor right away. Just don't want that thing around. I also don't need the mana crypt around, but if I need it later, I can always will it back. All right, at the end of his turn, we're going to charge a relic. And, ooh, what a nice rip. Sword of Feast and Famine off a workshop is so satisfying. It's down, and we're going to equip and swing. And if I can connect, I can use Snapcaster and Dig Through Time during, or even Mystical Teachings. So I'm definitely going to float as much mana as possible now that I've connected. And I'm going to use it to actually cast Mystical Teachings. And with that on the stack, I think my opponent realizes I'm going to go get a counter of some sort. And just, that means he's going to be continuously hit with what's on the board there for at least 1 to 2 more turns. So with that in mind, I think he quite sensibly just gives it up. Packs it in, and then runs one last game against me. I think it's the last game. Where he's playing, again, the best combination of commanders there. And I have a very fair draw, like just nothing too great. But I do get to Sunken Hollow with the top out because I went first, which allows me to use the top on turn 2. So basically, it's almost a time walk. Alright, so I'm going to get a mana crypt down now. It goes for Inquisition, which I attempt to forbid. I think I'm trying to buy it back, as a matter of fact. Yeah. And my opponent has no follow-up play. I have 1 mana floating, so he can't force spike this. He has no follow-up play. I'm going to use the top afterwards. And I'm going to play a land and Mind Twist him. I figured that would be the end of the game, but just with this happening, he scoops, which is really weird to me. I don't quite understand why he scooped there prior to the Mind Twist, but, you know, I'll take it. Alright, so A22 is playing... It's a DC, and I've got a very fair hand, but very good hand for all that. I mean, if you're going to have a hand that's fair and not crazily explosive, then this is probably one of the ones you want to have. Alright, so I'm going to play Tomb into Stoneforge here, only because I may want to hide the Strip Mine from my opponent. So I go ahead and get a Skull Clamp, thinking that I'm going to build up towards Breya, and then, well, actually I was thinking I'd build up towards Duretti. And then I would have an infinite source of card drawing. My opponent decays the clamp. So I just play Shackles here and pass. But this is actually a bad spot for me because my mana is really, really awkward. I meant to go get a black source with the Windswept Teeth. Like, I thought about getting one. And then that way if I drew red or white, I could Vindicate or Duretti. But I didn't, and... yeah, very awkward. Fortunately, I finally draw. My opponent uses a Reclamation Sage to take out my Mana Vault, my untapped Mana Vault, instead of my Shackles or my Orb, which I'm good with. So I get to steal his Rec Sage and start beating him down with an Orb out. Since he plays a Mana Elf, I give his guy back and switch it out for the Elf. Pass for the turn. Alright, so I drew a Mana Drain, and what I'm really hoping to do, my opponent Vampiric's here, and I figure, okay, one Orb's dead, or Shackles is dead. But he doesn't kill either one, so I'm just chilling out. I have a Preordain, so I'm going to go ahead and use that. But the main thing is I've got a Mana Drain, and I'm hoping to fire that off. I could also forbid using my Mana Elf, his Mana Elf, rather. Alright, so on his turn he does nothing. On my turn I draw Swords of Plowshares. I do nothing as a result because I know that he tutored. So I Mana Drain his attempt to remove my Winter Orb. And use Copy Artifact to take control of another one of his creatures via a second Battlekin Shackles. A turn later there. So anyway, on my opponent's turn, now he's got 2 creatures on my side, none in play, 3 lands untapped and 3 lands tapped. Pretty bad for him to try to work his way out of this. Meanwhile, I've got a Finhorn Elf and 2 creatures I'm hitting him with for some light damage. My opponent plays Oracle of Moldiah. Like, wow, thanks for the creature upgrade. I will happily accept. So I go ahead and reveal a Cryptic Command off of his Oracle, which I stole after giving him back his Reclamation Sage. And at this point, I don't know why, but oh, well, I played Duretti as well. And at this point, my opponent just gives up. But had he not, it was pretty clearly over, I think. And then I play Turbo Bird, and I make some mistakes, I believe. So the first mistake might be keeping this hand, but I think this hand is fine. It's just I don't sequence what I'm doing correctly, and I'll show you exactly what I'm talking about here. So I think it's okay till this, and this happens, and here's where I screw up. I have Empiric in response rather than Tithe. I got greedy. I should have just Tithe, played a land and said go, and then Enlightened Tutor at the end of his turn. Plays Gaddock Teague, and then I could have saved Empiric Tutor for Toxic Deluge, which is what I'm going to need this game. But I did not. So I go ahead and I'm like getting Jitte, thinking that in a million turns that'll be useful, instead of getting Crucible here or something that would be useful now. And as a result, my opponent just smashes the heck out of me, and I realize there's no coming back from this. Like I basically screwed up 3 times, and we're only on turn 3, and that's it. It's over. You can't afford to. You can't play like that. Like it's just not going to work out. And I deserve to lose that game. So again, I really love the decks that reward you for playing tight and punish you for playing poorly, and this does a very good job of that. So we start out. He decides to play me a couple more times, or he or she there, giving me an opportunity to make up for my poor play, and I make up for poor play with amazing starts. So as you can see, this is going to be a very early Jace, backed up by Force of Will. Totally nuts. Really good what's going on here. So I'm going to draw some extra card, put some cards away, Tithe into 2 more lands, which one of them will come down and one of them will not. I think I should have played Hallowed Fountain there. I don't know why I did that, but anyway, yeah, opponent just scoops something about there's no way I'm coming back from this, and I agree. So we move on to the 3rd game. This could have been a 3-game set here against Turbo Bird, but I think it was more interesting to play them all. So game 3, I've got the first hand was too fair, it was too slow. The second hand had no land. Third hand is fast, and that's what I want, speed. So go ahead and keep, and we're going to get some action going here real soon. So I'm trying to build up, I'm trying to use a good hand, but also build up both mana and cards so I can take advantage of that cruise in my hand. And look at this, a Natural Thalia, which screws up my Demonic Tutor for Gil Lotus plan, it screws up my Vedalken Shackles plan, and my opponent has a Sylvan. This is just getting ugly. So I finally get to play Lotus, and I'm thinking about, do I Enlighten Tutor, do I Shackles, what do I do on this turn? My opponent plays the big Thalia, and think about it and decide I'll take that and use the block little Thalia. My opponent doesn't walk into that. So next turn, I go and Enlighten Tutor, and I go get Copy Artifact so I can make another Vedalken Shackles. Start beating down with other Thalia, who is now going to force some of my opponent's artifacts and creatures to come into play tapped, which is going to allow me to close this game out a lot quicker. I have to do as much damage as I can to support the Mana Crypt damage that's happening over there, because my opponent has a Sylvan, and I really don't have much going on here. So I am going to cruise and hope to find a counter here. I do not. Instead, I'm going to Skull Clamp away Thalia, and then finally, I find a weak counter. I find Mana Leak. Against the way that the board is, it doesn't look like it's going to do too much good, but we'll see. Alright, so he played a Tabernacle at Vendrell Vale, and I had clamped one of his guys and then clamped the other one, and actually sacked it. So it lets him out of the cage of lands coming to play tapped, but it ended up powering me up so much that I think it was 100% the right thing to do. Maybe that's hindsight speaking, though, and not a true assessment. I don't know. Anyway, it did work out this game, though, so I go ahead and play Palace Jailer on an empty board, clamp up that guy, get Tezzeret out, and I'm setting up for some good things to happen. And I find a Vindicate, which is quite nice. And here my opponent just draws and scoops at 9 life. So fine. Fine by me. Turbo Bird goes down 1 game versus 2 instead of 3. And I move on to Utley 26. And old Utley here is playing a deck that's a little bit ugly. No, I don't know. Anyway, he's playing Rada Heir to Keld, and I actually think that this is a game where I make yet another tremendous mistake, but then my opponent does. So I'm going to force his Soul Ring with a Treachery early on. That just seems way too good too early. And then use Trinket Mage to go get a Mana Crypt. And I can play Jitte here, and I think this probably means I win till he Worldly Tutors and plays Rexage on Jitte. Alright, so that's fine then. Shoot Clamp. So go ahead and clamp up Trinket Mage, kill one of his lands and pass. Opponent tries to Vandal Blast, and I'm able to remand it back to his hand, and he doesn't have any more red mana, so I've got a small reprieve. Alright, so I smash in here. Makes no sense after I just drew Necro, and I'm trying to not die as my strategy. Then I let my opponent hit me here. This was just a stupid series of plays right there. But I drew Crucible. So I go get a source of both black and Swords to Plowshares mana. Trade with his Rexage, because I'm not willing to swords that thing when I can just trade for it. It doesn't do anything. It doesn't have any activated abilities or triggered abilities or whatever. And using Crucible, I decide to get Necro down, and I'm actually going to do it. Even though I'm at 11 life, I'm going to Necro. I think we're going to bug out here. This was a fun game because I actually Necro and get myself down to somewhere close to, if not at, 1 life, and then use Breya to build back up. And within a couple of turns, I'm safely so far ahead that my opponent just gives up. So I would have liked to have been able to show you the outcome of that game, or the rest of the story, but as I said, it bugged out. So move on to the next game here. So I can't remember if that was the second game against Italy or not. So no, it was not. All right, so here we go. This deck gives me a pretty big challenge this game, if I remember right. All right, so I've got an early mana drain, which is nice because it allows me to make this play here. I'm going to fetch land into a mana drain and then Light and Tutor during my upkeep and get Crucible Worlds and play it off of the mana drain mana plus the 1 land I had left over. But my opponent punishes my creativity with a Birthing Pod, so this is bad news, right? So I'm going to try to keep a creature off the board over there. He plays Squee, which means I'm definitely not keeping that off the board. And he plays Sense's Divining Top. So Squee, continues to come back from the dead. So I don't want to. I decide I'm not going to even try to fight this. I'm just going to let him have Squee Pod. I mean, you can only have so many targets anyway. So, well, we'll see. All right, let's see who he's killing. Oh, I see. So he killed Squee and he used it to go get Solemn Simulacrum off the Birthing Pod and then play Goblin Welder. So this is obviously like not going my way at all. Alright, so I fetch a few lands and get in for some cheap shots. And decide that what I'm going to do is clamp, pass. Opponent goes for Kiki Jiki, which has to get forced, or else I'm just going to lose. Sacks his Solemn and fetches an Acidic Slime. And then, weirdly enough, takes out, I think it was, Crucible Worlds, which has mostly done its damage now. I mean, for the people listening. So anyway, sorry, I'm starting to get a little bit, I'm starting to get mental drift here, so I need to wrap this up. Anyway, I got a Stoneforge here. I'm going to go ahead and slam in with Breya because I need to get, and Inumizo is Jitte, I need to get Goblin Welder off the table or else he's going to have a loop with Welder, Solemn Simulacrum. I'm still not happy because he's got Pod and Solemn, but So he actually clamps his solemn, and then during combat, I'm actually going to trade here. I'm surprised he doesn't pod away and go get a 5-drop, a second 5-drop, and I'm very pleased he does not. So he continues spending mana, plays Sundial the Infinite. I am quite happy with how this went. I'm going to play a Warden Power Stone, and then go get myself a Winter Orb with an Imperial Seal and Sensei's Divining Top combo. This turn I try to Wasteland his Ancient Tomb. When he untaps it, he just uses Sundial the Infinite to counter the Wasteland. Okay. So now we're playing a bit of a waiting game. My opponent tries to Beast Within my Winter Orb, and I believe I look with top, I find nothing. I sack a fetch land, and I look with top again, and I find Muddle the Mixture and Yogwill. Okay, let's grab that. So now that I know I have Yogwill, I might just play differently here. I can, end of his turn, I could disenchant my own Winter Orb, for example. I don't think I will, but it's an option. Okay, so for now I'm just going to chill out, pass, playing the game I want to play, which is a nice slow development game. And then he plays Rexage, and I decide what I'm going to do is I'm going to disenchant his Birthing Pod with the Reclamation Sage's ability on the stack and let him kill the Winter Orb, because I have Yawgmoth's Will on top of my deck. And then I sack my fetch land at the end of his turn out of habit, and I lose my Yawgmoth's Will, and I cannot believe that I just spent an entire game setting up a Yawgwill, and I just shuffled it away right before I drew it. It's so painful. Anyway, so next turn I get to draw a few cards off well, my opponent's getting to draw a few. Sorry, brain drift again. So my opponent's getting to draw a few cards using Squee and Skull Clamp, which is a pretty gnarly combo. Considering he had the Squee Skull Clamp thing going last game, I think. And then he scape shifts, so this is where my opponent makes a mistake. He sacks enough lands to kill me with Valakut right here. Just exactly enough. Not enough to put them all into play, though. I think he has to play one from hand, so he sacks 5, so Valakut and a bunch of triggers. So here it comes. Alright, so I was at 18, losing 3 per. I'm not at 0. So my opponent says something about how he misplayed as well. Anyway, which is fine by me. I'll take it. So I play my commander and shoot him, and just before I can finish finishing him off rather, Utley 26 concedes there. So thought that was cool. Pretty cool game. I have a couple more here. I think I'll just do these in another video because my brain is completely shutting down. It's way past when I wanted to be up, but I was having a lot of crashes and trying to make this videos. I guess I'm also need a little bit more practice getting back into the swing of things with video production as well as gameplay. I'm just generally rusty at all this. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed the videos. Thank you very much for watching. If you're new to the channel, then you can expect to see some more videos that'll generally play faster with less chattiness. If you're returning to the channel, thank you. Welcome back to watching some fun Breya games. And if I may end up actually playing a few multiplayer games. If you were to take this deck and adapt it to your multiplayer situation, then you may want to consider more cards like Humility Moat, as well as Psychonic Rift, cards that are generally a little bit weaker in 1v1, or maybe not necessarily appropriate for 1v1, but much stronger in group scenarios like that. So otherwise, thanks for watching, everyone, and I will see you next time.